In the gilded cage of 18th-century English aristocracy, a title was a fortress, and a heart was a liability. For Michael Beaumont, the formidable Duke of Northwood trust was a currency he refused to spend. Betrothed by contract to a woman he'd never met, the beautiful Lady Seraphina Cavendish, he devised a desperate test. He would shed his title, his silks, and his name, enlisting as a common soldier to watch her from the shadows. He sought to discover if her character was as pristine as her reputation. But what he unearthed was not a simple flaw. It was a devastating secret, a dark current of treason that threatened to not only shatter their future, but to drag his entire dukedom and his very life into ruin. The year of our Lord 1795 was a nervous time in England. Across the Channel, the French Revolution had descended into a bloody reign of terror, and the whispers of republicanism were a poison that the Crown feared would seep into the very foundations of the British aristocracy. It was a time of suspicion where a misplaced word or a foreign acquaintance could lead to accusations of treason. In the opulent library of Northwood Manor, surrounded by the leather-bound wisdom of ages, Michael Beaumont, the 8th Duke of Northwood, felt the weight of his era more keenly than most. At 29, he was a man forged in contrast, possessing a formidable intellect, honed at Cambridge, and the brutal pragmatism of a soldier who had briefly served in the Low Countries. He was master of one of England's most powerful dukedoms. He managed his vast estates with a meticulous, almost cold precision. It was this same precision that governed his emotions. His parents' loveless strategic marriage had been a cautionary tale, and a youthful infatuation with a baron's daughter who had tried to sell his affections to the highest bidder had frozen his heart into a well-guarded fortress. Now he was trapped by duty. His late father's final binding agreement was a marriage pact with the House of Cavendish, a family whose ancient lineage was matched only by their more recent and precarious financial standing. The union would secure a vital political alliance for the Beaumonts and provide a much-needed infusion of capital for the Cavendishes. The bride-to-be was Lady Seraphina Cavendish, a woman he knew only through a single, exquisitely painted miniature. She was, by all accounts, a paragon of virtue, beautiful, graceful, charitable, the perfect duchess. And Michael trusted none of it. "It's a fool's errand, your grace." Bartholomew. "Barty Higgins," said his voice, a low rumble of disapproval. Barty was less a valet and more a fixture of Michael's life, a man whose steadfast loyalty had been earned over 2 decades of service. He stood by the roaring hearth, polishing a silver snuff-box, with a frown etched onto his weathered face. Michael swirled the amber brandy in his glass, the firelight glinting off its surface. "It is a necessary one, Barty. I will not shackle myself and the Northwood line to a woman whose virtue is merely a performance. The world is a stage. I need to know if her character is genuine when the audience is gone. And you believe the best way to do that is to trade your ducal coronet for a private's wool cap to live on hardtack and watered-down ale, drilling under some bellowing sergeant major who wouldn't know a duke from a dog-catcher." "Precisely," Michael said, a grim smile touching his lips. "As Duke of Northwood, I would see only the flawless mask she presents to society. As Corporal Finn, a simple soldier garrisoned near her family estate of Oakhaven, I will be invisible. I will see the real woman. How she treats a servant, how she speaks to a shopkeeper, whether her famed charity is for show or from the heart. The plan was audacious, bordering on insane, but it had been meticulously arranged. Through a discreet channel in the War Office, a position had been created in the 33rd Regiment of Foot, currently stationed in the market town of Ashford, a mere 5 miles from Oakhaven. His official ducal papers would state he was on a diplomatic mission to Vienna, providing him with a perfect alibi for his months-long absence. Only Barty would know the truth. And what if she is everything you hope? Barty pressed, setting the snuff-box down. What then? You reveal you've been deceiving her from the start. A fine foundation for a marriage, that is. Trust. If she is genuine, she will have the strength of character to understand my reasons. Michael countered, though a sliver of doubt pricked him. And if she is false, I will have saved myself and my name from ruin. It is a calculated risk. The preparations took a fortnight. The Duke's expensive tailored coats were replaced with a coarse scarlet tunic that smelled faintly of dye and wool. His polished riding boots gave way to scuffed, thick-soled marching boots designed for mud-knot ballrooms. Barty painstakingly coached him on a new backstory. Finian Finn Rook, the second son of a minor gentleman farmer from Yorkshire, educated but disinherited, seeking his fortune and a sense of purpose in the king's army. He even practiced dulling his crisp authoritative accent, adopting a flatter, more common cadence. The most difficult part was the physical transformation. He let his dark hair grow slightly unkempt and allowed a permanent shadow of stubble to grace his sharp jawline. A skilled theatrical artist from London was discreetly summoned to apply a faint, expertly crafted scar along his left cheekbone, a plausible mark of a past brawl or fencing mishap that subtly altered his aristocratic features. On the final night, as he stood before a long mirror, Michael barely recognized himself. The powerful Duke was gone. In his place stood a man who looked weary, hardened, and utterly unremarkable. Corporal Finn was born. He handed Barty a sealed packet. If you do not hear from me by the 1st of November, deliver this to my solicitor. It contains instructions for the management of the estate and other matters. Barty took the packet, his expression grave. Godspeed, Your Grace. It's Finn now. Barty Michael corrected his voice, devoid of its usual command. Just Finn. Riding out from northward, under the cloak of a pre-dawn mist, on a sturdy but plain gelding, Michael felt a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in his life, he was unburdened by his title. He was simply a man on a journey heading south toward Kent, toward a woman named Seraphina, and toward a truth he was certain he was prepared to face. He could not have been more wrong. The reality of military life was a brutal shock to Michael's system. The Ashford barracks were a world away from the perfumed halls of Northwood. They were cramped, perpetually damp, and smelled of unwashed bodies, stale beer, and boiled cabbage. His bunk was a thin straw pallet. His companions were rough, uneducated men whose concerns rarely strayed beyond their next meal or their next dalliance with a tavern maid. He was no longer Your Grace. He was Rook. He was subject to the whims of Sergeant O'Malley, a bear of an Irishman, with a voice like grinding gravel, and a profound dislike for recruits who seemed to think themselves a cut above the rest. Michael, with his instinctively straight posture and precise speech, was an immediate target. He learned humility on the parade ground, his ducal muscles screaming in protest as he drilled for hours under the unforgiving sun. He learned to clean his musket until it shone, to polish his boots with spit and blacking, and to stomach the lumpy porridge that passed for breakfast. He endured it all with a stoic resolve that eventually earned him a grudging respect from O'Malley and his fellow soldiers. They saw a quiet, determined man, not a nobleman playing dress-up. His invented backstory held firm. He was just another soul ground down by circumstance, seeking refuge in the rigid order of the army. For the first few weeks, he observed Lady Seraphina Cavendish from a distance. On Sundays, he would see her arriving for services at St. Mary's Church in Ashford, stepping from a handsome carriage. The painted miniature had not done her justice. She was tall and slender, with hair the colour of spun gold pinned in an elegant chignon, and eyes the startling blue of a summer sky. She moved with an innate grace that commanded attention without demanding it. He watched as she offered a warm smile to the vicar, as she bent to speak to a small, grubby child, her gloved hand resting gently on the girl's head. It was a perfect portrait of genteel kindness. His cynical heart remained unmoved. It was a public performance, he told himself. Easy to do when the whole town was watching. His opportunity for a closer encounter came unexpectedly. He was on patrol duty, walking the perimeter of the town, when a sudden downpour erupted from the heavens. Taking shelter under the awning of a closed bakery, he saw the Cavendish carriage speeding down the muddy lane. Suddenly, one of the front wheels hit a deep, unseen rut. There was a sickening crack of splintering wood, and the entire carriage lurched violently, tipping to one side. Michael didn't hesitate. He ran through the driving rain, his heavy boots splashing through the puddles. The driver was dazed, and a footman was struggling with the spooked horses. Michael went to the carriage door, which was jammed at a precarious angle. "My lady, are you all right?" he called out. A frightened voice came from within. "Yes, I believe so. But the door, it's stuck." With a grunt of effort, Michael put his shoulder to the frame and heaved. The wood groaned in protest before finally giving way. He wrenched the door open and offered his hand. The hand that took his was small and encased in soft leather, but her grip was firm. As he helped her down onto the muddy ground, he found himself looking directly into those startlingly blue eyes. Up close, they were not just beautiful. They held a depth, a flicker of anxiety, that was quickly masked by a polite smile. "Thank you, Corporal," she said, her voice as poised as he'd expected. "You were very quick to assist. It is my duty to help my lady," he replied, his voice the carefully practiced monotone of Corporal Finn. Her lady's maid, a young woman with wide, nervous eyes named Matilda, scrambled out after her. Seraphina's gaze swept over the broken axle. "It seems we are stranded. Ashford is only a mile's walk, my lady." "But this rain is relentless," Michael said, his eyes on her fine silk dress, which was already being spattered with mud. Without a second thought for military protocol, he shrugged off his thick scarlet wool tunic. The rain immediately soaked his thin linen shirt, but he ignored the chill. "Here, my lady. It is not much, but it will offer some protection from the worst of it." She looked taken aback. No one of common station would be so bold. For a moment, he saw a flicker of the aristocratic lady assessing an impertinent underling, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by genuine surprise and gratitude. "That is very kind of you, Corporal, but you will catch your death. I'm hardier than I look," he said, with a small, self-deprecating smile. He held the heavy coat out, and after a moment's hesitation, she allowed him to drape it over her shoulders. The coarse wool was a stark contrast to her delicate frame. It dwarfed her, yet she pulled it around herself with a simple dignity. The scent of rain wool and faintly her lavender perfume filled the air between them. He escorted her and Matilda back towards town, the driver following with the limping horses. The walk was mostly silent, the sound of the rain drumming on the wool of the coat he had given her. But it was a charged silence. He was acutely aware of her presence beside him, of the vulnerability the accident had imposed upon her. He had expected a haughty, fragile creature who would complain about the mud and the inconvenience. Instead, she walked with a steady stride, asking him questions about his regiment and his duties with a sincere interest that seemed entirely unforced. When they reached the first inn at the edge of town, she stopped and turned to him, handing back his sodden coat. Her fingers brushed his, and an unexpected jolt like static on a dry day passed between them. "Corporal, she prompted. "Finn, my lady. Corporal Finn Rook." "Corporal Finn," she repeated, her eyes meeting his. "I am in your debt. My father, the Earl of Cavendish, will wish to thank you personally. Please call upon Oakhaven tomorrow." Michael's mind raced. This was exactly the opportunity he had been seeking a way to get inside the estate, to observe her in her natural habitat. "That is not necessary, my lady. I was only doing my duty." "Nonsense," she insisted, a firmness in her tone that surprised him. "I will not hear of it. Tomorrow at midday." Before he could protest further, she gave him a small, genuine smile, the first he believed was not for public consumption, and disappeared into the inn. Walking back to the barracks, soaked to the bone, and shivering, Michael felt a profound sense of unease. The encounter had not gone as planned. He had intended to be a detached observer. Instead, he had become a participant. And the brief touch of her hand, the sincere gratitude in her eyes, had stirred something within him, something he had long thought dormant. The ice around his heart had not melted, but for the first time in years, he felt the faintest, most unsettling of cracks. The next day, Michael presented himself at the servants' entrance of Oakhaven. The estate was beautiful, a sprawling Jacobean manor of warm, honey-coloured stone, but he noted with a practised eye the signs of genteel decay, a crumbling balustrade on the east terrace, patches of moss on the roof gardens that were elegant but lacked the manicured perfection of his own. The Cavendishes were clearly struggling to maintain the appearance of wealth. He was ushered not into the kitchens, but into a small, respectable study, where the Earl of Cavendish, a frail, white-haired man with a perpetually worried expression, thanked him formally. The Earl was polite, but distant, his mind clearly elsewhere. He pressed a few coins into Michael's hand, a reward Michael accepted with a humble nod to maintain his cover. It was Seraphina who insisted he stay for a meal in the kitchens. "It is the least we can do," she said, overriding the butler's scandalized look. Over a plate of stew, surrounded by the hustle and bustle of the kitchen staff, Michael watched her. She spoke to the cook, Mrs. Gable, not as a mistress to a servant, but with the familiar affection one might show a cherished aunt asking after her husband's gout. She complimented a young scullery maid on a bit of embroidery she was mending. Michael saw the genuine smiles she received in return. This was not a performance for the public. This, he had to admit, seemed to be her true nature kind, compassionate and respected by her staff. His carefully constructed cynicism was beginning to fail him. Over the next few weeks, he found more excuses to be near Oakhaven. He would volunteer for patrols that passed the estate or spend his off-duty hours in Ashford, hoping for another chance encounter. He learned that Seraphina spent 2 mornings a week at the local orphanage, not merely donating money, but reading to the children, her clear, calm voice weaving tales of knights and dragons. He saw her in the market, discreetly paying the bill for an elderly woman who came up short at the baker's stall. Each act of kindness was a chisel chipping away at his fortress of distrust. He started to feel a growing sense of shame for his deception. This woman was not the shallow socialite he had feared. She was good and honorable. He found himself not merely observing her, but admiring her, and with admiration came a more dangerous emotion. He was starting to fall in love with his own fiancée. It was this burgeoning affection that made him notice the other things, the things that didn't fit the perfect picture. He began to see the strain beneath her serene composure. There was a constant, subtle tension in the set of her shoulders. He would sometimes see her staring into the distance, a look of profound, haunted worry in her eyes, before she caught herself and composed her features into a placid mask. One evening on a late patrol near the edge of the Cavendish woods, he saw her. She was cloaked and hooded, moving swiftly and silently along a path far from the main house. Her furtive movements were entirely out of character. Curiosity turning to a cold dread, he tethered his horse and followed on foot, moving through the trees like a wraith. She stopped in a secluded clearing, a place dominated by the ruins of an old chapel. A figure emerged from the shadows to meet her. It was a man tall and elegantly dressed, his face obscured by the twilight. Michael was too far away to hear their words, but their body language spoke volumes. The conversation was tense, urgent. Serafina's posture was rigid, pleading. At one point, the man grabbed her arm and she flinched away. He handed her a small sealed packet, which she tucked quickly into the folds of her cloak. Then, as silently as he had appeared, the man melted back into the woods. Serafina remained for a long moment, her head bowed, one hand pressed against a crumbling stone wall, as if for support. When she finally looked up, the moonlight caught her face, and Michael's blood ran cold. Her expression was one of pure despair. He returned to the barracks that night, his mind a maelstrom of confusion and suspicion. Who was that man? What was in the packet? Was this a clandestine lover? The thought sent a savage, unexpected pang of jealousy through him. It was an emotion he despised, an emotion he hadn't felt since his youth, and it was directed at a woman he was supposed to be testing, not desiring. A week later, his duties took him into Ashford to deliver a dispatch. As he passed the Black Swan, the town's most respectable coaching inn, he saw the same tall, elegant man from the woods emerging from a private carriage. This time, Michael saw his face clearly. He was a distinguished gentleman, in his late 50s, with silver hair and a calculating gaze. Michael recognized him instantly from London society. It was Lord Percival Morley, a close friend of the late Earl of Cavendish, and a man known for his shrewd investments and political connections. Why would Serafina be meeting a family friend in secret in the dead of night in a ruined chapel? Why the secrecy? Why the look of utter misery on her face? The questions gnawed at him. His initial mission to test her virtue seemed laughably naive now. He had stumbled upon something far more complex, far more sinister. He was a soldier, a duke, a man trained to recognize threats, and every instinct he possessed was screaming that Lady Serafina Cavendish was in terrible danger, or that she herself was the danger. He redoubled his surveillance, his heart now a battlefield of warring emotions. One part of him, the Corporal Finn who had felt the warmth of her smile, desperately wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. But the other part, the Duke of Northwood, responsible for his name and his duty to the crown, feared the worst. He felt as though he was standing on the edge of a precipice, and the woman he was beginning to love was about to pull him into the abyss with her. The cracks he had seen in her facade were becoming gaping chasms, revealing a darkness he was wholly unprepared for. The autumn air grew colder, and so did the knot of dread in Michael's stomach. The clandestine meetings continued. Twice more he shadowed Serafina to the ruined chapel, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and a desperate, sickening curiosity. Each time Lord Morley was there waiting. Their encounters were brief, furtive, and ended with Serafina looking more broken than before. Michael's mind constructed a dozen grim scenarios. Was Morley her lover? Was he blackmailing her over some past indiscretion? The idea of this kind, charitable woman having a sordid secret seemed impossible, yet the evidence was damning. His nights were sleepless, his days a torture of suspicion. The simple soldier's life, that had at first felt like a burden, now felt like an unbearable charade. He was in love with a woman he could not trust, a woman whose life was a web of secrets. The breaking point came on a moonless, windswept night in late October. Word had reached the barracks that a French frigate had been spotted off the coast of Kent, likely attempting to land spies or deliver messages to sympathizers. The entire regiment was on high alert. Michael, his senses honed by the impending threat, knew he could not let Serafina's next meeting go unobserved. This was no longer just about his marriage. It was a matter of national security. He feigned a sudden illness, a ruse that earned him a string of curses from Sergeant O'Malley, but got him excused from the night patrol. As soon as the barracks were quiet, he slipped out a dark cloak covering his uniform and made his way towards Oakhaven. This time he was determined to get closer to hear what was being said. He reached the ruined chapel well before the appointed time, concealing himself inside the crumbling shell of the old bell tower. It offered a vantage point overlooking the clearing, and the holes in the stonework would allow their voices to carry on the wind. He waited, his body chilled, his nerves stretched taut. Shortly after midnight, Serafina arrived, a frantic, hunted look on her face. Morley emerged from the shadows moments later. He did not bother with pleasantries. "Did you bring it?" Morley's voice was a low, cultured growl stripped of its usual parliamentary charm. "Yes," Serafina whispered, her voice trembling. She held out a folded piece of paper. "It is the list of provisions for the Dover garrison. The schedules, the quantities, everything you asked for." Michael felt the air leave his lungs. This wasn't a lover's tryst. This was espionage. Morley snatched the paper and scanned it by the light of a small shielded lantern. He grunted in satisfaction. "Excellent. Your source is reliable." "Please," Serafina begged, her voice cracking. "You promised this would be the last time. You promised that if I did this, you would release the liens on my family's estate and you would leave my brother alone." Michael's mind reeled. Her brother. Thomas Cavendish was a boy of 15, studying at Eton. A frail, scholarly child by all accounts. Morley laughed, a dry, cruel sound that echoed in the ruins. "My dear Serafina, promises are like pie crusts made to be broken. You are far too valuable an asset to let go. The French are very pleased with your work. And as for your brother, Eton can be a dangerous place for a young boy whose family is disgraced by debt. Accidents happen, a fall from a horse, a fever that is not properly attended. It would be a tragedy." Tears streamed down Serafina's face, catching the dim lantern light. "You are a monster." "I am a pragmatist," Morley corrected smoothly. "Your father was a fool. He trusted me with his finances, and he gambled everything away. I hold the deed to Oakhaven to everything you have. I own you, and through you I will have a direct line into the household of your fiancé, the Duke of Northwood." The name hit Michael like a physical blow. He leaned against the cold stone, his knuckles white. This was not just about the Cavendishes. He was the ultimate target. "The Duke is a powerful man," Morley continued, his voice laced with venom. "He has the ear of Prime Minister Pitt himself. He is privy to military strategies, troop movements, secrets that my associates in Paris would pay a king's ransom for. Once you are his Duchess, you will be my eyes and ears inside the very heart of the British war effort." "No," Serafina choked out. "I will not betray him. I will not betray my country." Morley stepped closer. His face, a mask of predatory menace. "You will, or your brother will pay the price, and your father's name will be dragged through every gutter in London as a debtor and a failure. You will be penniless, homeless and grieving. Do you understand me?" She could only nod her body, racked with silent sobs. "Good," Morley said, tucking the stolen document into his coat. "I will be in touch. Expect another task soon. A much more significant one." He turned and vanished into the darkness, leaving Serafina alone in the clearing. She sank to her knees, her shoulders shaking the sound of her heartbroken weeping, the only sound besides the rustling of the wind. From his hiding place in the tower, Michael felt a cataclysm of emotion. The woman he loved was a traitor. The woman he loved was a spy, and she was doing it to save her family. Every shred of his carefully constructed cynicism, his ducal pride, his soldier's duty shattered in that instant. He saw not a criminal, but a victim. A woman trapped in the most impossible of circumstances, forced to choose between treason and the life of her brother. Morley had not just blackmailed her. He had weaponized her love, her loyalty, her decency. His own deception, his pathetic little test, seemed like a child's game in the face of this monstrous reality. He had wanted to see her true character, and now he had. He had seen a woman of unimaginable strength, willing to sacrifice her own honor, her own soul to protect the people she loved. The pain of her betrayal was a white-hot agony in his chest, but it was eclipsed by a surge of something far more powerful, a burning, murderous rage directed at Percival Morley, and an overwhelming, desperate need to save Serafina from the hell she was living in. But how could he? He was Corporal Finn, a nobody. And if he revealed himself as the Duke, he would become complicit in her treason. His fiancée a spy for the French, the scandal would destroy them both. Lord Morley had not just trapped Serafina. He had trapped them all. In that moment, watching the woman he loved weep in the ruins. Michael Beaumont, Duke of Northwood, finally understood what it was to be truly, utterly helpless. He had sought a secret, and the one he had found was powerful enough to destroy him completely. For 2 days, Michael was a ghost. He performed his duties at the barracks by wrote his mind 1,000 miles away, replaying the horrific scene in the chapel ruins. The image of Serafina on her knees, sobbing in despair, was seared into his memory. His anger at Morley was a physical thing, a coil of heat in his gut that demanded action. But his thoughts were a tangled mess of duty and desire, law and love. As a duke of the realm, his path was clear. He should report Morley and Serafina to the authorities. Morley would be hanged as a traitor. Serafina, she too would face the gallows, or at best be exiled in shame, her family ruined forever. The thought was unbearable. It would be a righteous act, a lawful act, and it would feel like plunging a dagger into his own heart. He could not do it. He would not. He realized then that his test was over. He was no longer an objective observer judging her worthiness. He was a man in love with a woman in mortal peril. He had to reach her, had to let her know she was not alone. But he couldn't approach her as the Duke. The shock and the complexity of that revelation would be too much. He had to approach her as the only person she knew to trust, outside her blighted circle, Corporal Finn. He found his chance the following afternoon. He knew she often sought solitude in a small, secluded garden, Folly on the far side of the Oakhaven estate, a Grecian-style temple half overgrown with ivy. He went there, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, and waited. She arrived an hour later, looking pale and fragile, the shadows under her eyes darker than ever. She sat on a cold stone bench, staring blankly at a withered rosebush, the very picture of defeat. He stepped out from behind a pillar. "My lady." She gasped, startled, her hand flying to her chest. Her eyes were wide with fear before she recognized him. "Corporal Finn. You frightened me. My apologies. I did not mean to intrude." He remained standing a respectful distance away. "I saw you from the path. You looked distressed." I was concerned. Her composure, that flawless aristocratic mask, slid back into place. "I am quite well, thank you, Corporal. Merely enjoying the autumn air." He could have let it go, retreated, and devised another plan. But looking at her brave, broken face, he knew he couldn't. He took a step closer. "My lady," he said, his voice quiet but intense. We both know that is not true." The directness of his statement startled her. Her polite facade crumbled, and a flash of raw panic crossed her face. "I don't know what you mean." The ruined chapel, he said the words, costing him everything. "I saw you. I saw you with Lord Morley." All colour drained from her face. She looked as if he had struck her. She rose to her feet, her body trembling. "You were spying on me," she whispered, a mixture of terror and outrage in her voice. "I was on patrol. I saw your meeting, and I was concerned for your safety." I heard what he said. I heard his threats. The dam of her composure burst. A strangled sob escaped her lips, and she sank back onto the bench, her face in her hands. "Then you know," she wept. "You know everything." He moved to sit beside her, the distance between lady and corporal forgotten. "I know you are being blackmailed. I know he threatened your brother." She looked up at him, her beautiful face ravaged by tears and fear. "You must not tell anyone, Corporal. Please. He will kill Thomas. I know he will. He is a ruthless man. He is a traitor," Michael said, his voice hard as iron. "And he is using you to commit treason against your own country." "What choice do I have?" she cried, her voice rising in desperation. "My father left us drowning in debt. Morley holds our entire lives in his hands. He presents himself to the world as our savior, the benevolent family friend, managing our affairs, but he is a vulture. He has been bleeding us dry for years, waiting for the right moment. And now he wants me to spy on my own fiancé, on the Duke of Northwood." She spat the title as if it were a curse. "A man I have never even met, a man I am being sold to, like livestock, to settle my family's debts. And now I am expected to betray him too." Her confession, raw and unvarnished, tore through him. He saw the impossible weight she had been carrying alone. He reached out his hand, hovering for a moment, before he gently covered her trembling fingers with his own. It was a shocking breach of protocol, but in that moment, they were not a lady and a corporal. They were just a man and a woman, united by a terrible secret. "You are not alone in this," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he no longer tried to hide. She looked at him, her blue eyes searching his face, desperately seeking an ally in her desolate world. "But what can you do? You are just a soldier. If you report him, he will deny everything, and he will destroy my family out of spite before he is ever brought to justice. His word against that of a common soldier and a compromised woman, we would not stand a chance." She was right. As Corporal Finn, he was powerless. His disguise, which he had intended as a tool of discovery, had become a cage. It was time. The deception had to end. He stood up and looked down at her, his heart pounding. "Lady Seraphina," he began, his voice changing, the rough common cadence falling away to be replaced by the crisp authoritative tone of command that was his birthright. "Your assessment of a corporal's influence is correct." She stared up at him, a confused frown forming on her face at the sudden change in his speech and demeanor. However, he continued, reaching up and running a hand through his hair, pushing it back from his forehead, in a gesture that was entirely aristocratic. A duke's influence is another matter entirely. Seraphina's eyes widened, her mind struggling to comprehend his words, his transformation. The way he stood, the sudden fire in his eyes, the unmistakable aura of power that now radiated from him. It was all terrifyingly familiar, an echo of the portraits and descriptions she had studied. "My name is not Finn Rook," he said, his voice low and steady, though his world was tilting on its axis. "It is Michael Beaumont. I am the Duke of Northwood, your fiancé." The silence that followed his confession was absolute, broken only by the rustling of the autumn leaves. Serafina stared at him, her face a canvas of disbelief, shock and dawning horror. She scrambled to her feet, backing away from him, as if he were a serpent who had just shed its skin. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "It's not possible. You're lying. I wish I were," Michael said, his heart aching at the terror he saw in her eyes. "I came to Ashford under this guise to learn the truth of your character before our marriage. It was a contemptible, arrogant thing to do, and I will spend the rest of my life begging your forgiveness for it. But it led me to you. It led me to the truth of this." Her mind was racing, connecting the pieces. His sudden appearance, his kindness, his presence at the chapel. "You are testing me," she said, the accusation laced with a fresh wave of pain. This was all some cruel game. It began as one, he admitted, his voice raw with regret. "It is not one now, Serafina. I have seen your heart. I have seen your strength and your loyalty to your family. What Morley is forcing you to do is not a reflection of your character. It is a testament to it. He has twisted your love into a weapon against you." He saw the conflict warring in her eyes, the instinct to flee from this man who had so thoroughly deceived her, and the desperate flickering hope that he might be her salvation. What will you do?" she stammered, wrapping her arms around herself. "Will you turn me in?" He closed the distance between them, stopping just short of touching her. He looked directly into her eyes, willing her to see the sincerity, the love that he could no longer hide. "I will never let any harm come to you," he said with a conviction that shook them both. "I will not let Morley destroy you, your brother or your family. We are going to destroy him." A spark of defiance ignited in her gaze, replacing the fear. "How he is clever and powerful. He has all the proof of my family's debts, and now he has proof of my treason. He has a piece of paper listing garrison provisions which could be explained away." Michael countered his mind, already working, the strategic part of his brain taking over. "What we need is to catch him in an undeniable act of treason, an act so blatant that not even his powerful friends can protect him. We will not be his victims. We will be the architects of his downfall. You and I. Together." The word "together" hung in the air, a promise of an alliance she'd never dared to hope for. She looked at this man, this duke who had scrubbed floors, this corporal who spoke with the authority of a king, and for the first time in months, she felt not despair, but a sliver of hope. They retreated to the relative privacy of the folly. For the next hour, the Duke and his lady equals in a conspiracy born of desperation began to plot. Michael's plan was audacious, dangerous, and required nerves of steel. It hinged on turning Serafina from a pawn into the most crucial player in the game. "Morley wants information about me, about my work," Michael said, pacing the stone floor. "He wants military secrets. We will give them to him. We will feed him information so valuable, so sensitive, that he will have no choice but to pass it to his French contacts immediately. And when he does, we will be waiting." He explained the plan. He would use his ducal authority to get a message to London, not to the regular authorities, but to a secretive branch of the Home Office that dealt with counter-espionage, a man named Sir Robert Peel, whom he trusted implicitly. He would arrange for a set of fabricated documents to be created battle plans for a supposed British offensive in Flanders. The plans would be detailed, authentic-looking, and utterly false. They would be a tantalizing prize for the French. "You will tell Morley you overheard me discussing these plans with a visiting general," Michael instructed Serafina. "You will tell him you know where I keep the documents in my London study. You will arrange one final meeting. Not in the woods, not in the shadows. We need a witness. We need to control the location." They decided on a neutral location, a private room at the Black Swan Inn in Ashford, the very place Michael had seen Morley before. "It's too risky," Serafina breathed the enormity of the plan pressing down on her. What if he suspects something he won't? Michael assured her his confidence, a balm to her frayed nerves. His arrogance is his weakness. He believes he has you completely under his control. He will be blinded by the prize we are offering him. But you must be strong, Serafina. You must play your part perfectly. She straightened her shoulders, a new resolve hardening her features. He has taken everything from me. My peace, my honor. I will not let him take my future as well. I will do it. That evening, Michael did not return to the barracks. He rode hard through the night to a trusted estate, 10 miles away from where he dispatched a rider to London with a coded message for Sir Robert. He then returned not as Corporal Finn, but as himself arriving at Oakhaven in a borrowed but suitably grand carriage. The charade was over. The Duke of Northwood had officially arrived to court his fiancée. The Earl of Cavendish, flustered and overwhelmed, welcomed him. The staff who had known him as the quiet corporal stared in stunned silence. When Michael and Serafina stood together in the grand drawing-room, the dynamic between them had irrevocably changed. To the outside world, they were the picture of an arranged aristocratic match. But in the charged glances they exchanged, in the subtle pressure of his hand on her arm, they were partners in a deadly game. His deception had almost destroyed them, but in a strange, cruel twist of fate, it had also forged a bond between them far stronger than any marriage contract, a bond of shared danger, mutual reliance, and a burgeoning, hard-won trust. The trap for Lord Morley was set. Now all they could do was wait for him to walk into it. The following days were a masterpiece of performance. Duke Michael Beaumont played the part of the attentive, if somewhat formal fiancé. He toured the Oakhaven estate, with the Earl discussing crop rotation and land management with an expertise that left the older man bewildered. He and Serafina took chaperoned walks, their conversations, to any who might overhear, filled with the polite banalities of their class. But beneath the surface, every word was a reaffirmation of their plan, every shared look a silent promise. Serafina sent a message to Lord Morley, using their pre-arranged covert channel. She claimed the Duke had become careless in his courtship, leaving sensitive papers from his dispatch box unattended. She had seen them. They were plans for Flanders. She had to see him urgently. As Michael predicted, Morley's greed and arrogance overwhelmed any suspicion. He agreed to the meeting at the Black Swan Inn. The chosen evening was dark and stormy, the wind howling around the eaves of the inn like a restless spirit. The private dining room Morley had secured was on the second floor. In the adjoining room, concealed behind a tapestry and a discreetly drilled peephole, Michael stood with 2 of Sir Robert Peel's most trusted agents, plain-clothed men who looked more like provincial merchants than officers of the Crown. They had arrived from London that afternoon, silent and efficient. Michael's heart hammered against his ribs. Everything depended on Serafina. She arrived looking pale, but composed a vision in deep blue silk. Michael had watched her leave Oakhaven, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. Remember, he had whispered, "You are not his victim. You are the bait in our trap." Morley was already waiting a bottle of expensive French claret on the table. He dispensed with any pretense of friendliness. "Show me what you have," he demanded. Serafina's hand trembled slightly as she reached into her reticule. She placed a sheaf of papers on the table. They were the forgeries from London, complete with the Duke of Northwood's authentic seal. "These are copies I made while he was out riding." She lied, her voice steady. "The originals are in his dispatch box." Morley snatched them, his eyes scanning the maps and troop dispositions with feverish excitement. This was it. the intelligence that would make him invaluable to the French, that would secure his fortune and power when, as he believed, the revolutionary tide inevitably swept across England. "This is magnificent," he breathed. "More than I could have hoped for." He looked up at her, a smug, possessive smile on his lips. "You have done well, my dear. You will make a most useful Duchess." Serafina stood tall, her fear masked by a cold fury. "This is the last time, Percival. Our arrangement is over. You will return my father's notes of debt, and you will never contact me or my brother again." Morley laughed. "You foolish girl. Our arrangement is just beginning. You are mine, Serafina. You will always be mine." As he spoke those damning words, the door connecting the two rooms burst open. Michael stepped through, no longer the humble corporal or the polite duke, but a figure of pure, cold authority. Behind him, Peel's agents moved with swift precision, their pistols levelled at Morley. Morley froze, the stolen papers clutched in his hand, his face a mask of utter shock and disbelief. He stared from the agents to Serafina, and finally to Michael, the truth crashing down upon him. Northwood, he choked out. "It's over, Morley, Michael," said his voice, like ice. "You have been caught in the act of receiving sensitive military documents for the purpose of conveying them to a hostile foreign power, an act of high treason." The agents seized Morley, who began to bluster and threaten naming powerful friends in Parliament. But the evidence was irrefutable. The forged plans, now evidence, were secured. He was dragged from the room, his face ashen, his empire of deceit and manipulation crumbling to dust in a single perfectly executed moment. When they were gone, the room fell silent. Serafina stood trembling, the adrenaline fading, leaving her exhausted and shaky. Michael went to her gently, taking her hands in his. They were ice cold. "It's over," he said softly. "You are safe. Your family is safe." He had already prepared a cover story for the Crown. Lord Morley had been trying to compromise the Duke of Northwood's fiancée, who had bravely played along to entrap the traitor. The Cavendish name would be cleared, and Michael's personal funds would quietly settle their debts, a wedding gift that was in truth an act of restitution. She looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "You deceived me. You put me through a terrible ordeal." "I did," he admitted, his own voice thick with remorse. "My test was born of pride and fear. I did not deserve to find a woman as courageous and honourable as you. I came seeking a flawless duchess, and instead I found a true and noble woman. One who was willing to sacrifice everything for those she loves." He released her hands and took a step back, creating a formal distance between them. "The marriage contract between our families was arranged by our fathers. I will give you my word now that I will find a way to dissolve it without any scandal to you or your family, if that is your wish. You are free, Serafina. You owe me nothing." She looked at him, truly, looked at the man who had worn a corporal's uniform for her, who had faced down her tormentor, who was now offering her an escape from the very union he had once demanded. She saw past the Duke and the soldier. She saw Michael, a proud, flawed, but ultimately good man who had been willing to risk everything, his title, his reputation, his life, for her. A small, genuine smile touched her lips for the first time in what felt like an eternity. I believe she said, her voice clear and strong, that dissolving the contract would be a great waste. After all, it is not every day a lady discovers her fiancé is willing to go to war for her before they have even been properly introduced. Relief and a profound, overwhelming joy washed over Michael. He stepped forward again, and this time, when he took her hands, it was not as a duke, claiming his prize, but as a man who had finally found his equal. Seraphina Cavendish, he said, his heart in his eyes, "Will you do me the honor of forgiving my deception and consent to be my wife?" "I will, Michael Beaumont," she replied, her smile widening, "on the condition that there are no more secrets between us." None, he vowed, sealing his promise with a kiss that was not part of any contract, but the beginning of a love story forged in deception, tested by treason, and finally triumphantly claimed by truth. So ends the tumultuous story of Michael and Seraphina, a duke who dressed as a soldier to test for loyalty, and a lady whose secret was a burden, not a betrayal. Their journey began in suspicion and spiraled into a vortex of espionage and high-stakes danger, proving that the truest tests of character are not the ones we devise, but the ones life forces upon us. They sought a marriage of convenience, and instead forged a partnership of unbreakable strength, discovering that true love isn't found in flawless perfection, but in the courage to fight for one another when everything is on the line. If this story of love, betrayal, and redemption moved you and kept you on the edge of your seat, please show your support. Hit that like button, share this video with fellow fans of historical drama, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more stories that bring the past to life. Your support allows us to keep telling these tales. Thank you for listening.